All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to tackle something huge, an idea that has been quietly shaping the Western world for centuries: original sin. But we're not just explaining it, we're giving it a total reconsideration, based on what the source material actually says. For, about 1,500 years, this one idea that we inherit Adam's actual guilt has been a bedrock of Western Christian theology. It's the reason behind so much, from infant baptism all the way to how we even think about salvation itself. But here's the wild part, the question that's going to drive everything we talk about today. What if that entire massive cornerstone, holding up so much theology for so long, was actually built on a simple mistranslation? Now, before we get to that translation, we got to understand the traditional idea itself. So let's unpack how this concept of inherited guilt is supposed to work. You know, the logic is actually really simple and, well, powerful. It's a three-step chain reaction. Step 1, Adam sins. Step 2, the legal guilt from that sin gets passed down, like a family debt, which leads to this staggering conclusion in step 3. Every single one of us is born guilty, condemned from the get-go, before we've had a chance to do a single thing. So how exactly is this guilt supposed to be transmitted? Well, theologians came up with two main theories. On one hand, you've got federal headship. Think of Adam as our legal representative, like an ambassador. He signed a bad treaty, and we all have to live with the consequences. On the other hand, there's seminal headship, which is way more literal. It suggests we were all somehow physically present in Adam when he sinned, so we're directly responsible. Either way you slice it, the conclusion's the same. His guilt is now our guilt. So that's the traditional view in a nutshell. But for all its historical weight, it creates some really big theological puzzles. Problems that, frankly, have never been answered in a fully satisfying way. Let's look at 3 of the biggest ones. First, there's the justice puzzle. And this one just hits you right in the gut. Is it truly fair for someone to be condemned for a crime they didn't personally commit? It just seems to go against our deepest instincts about what justice is. Then you've got the Christology puzzle. The Bible traces Jesus' family tree right back to Adam. So if this guilt is passed down through the family line, how on earth did Jesus avoid it? The classic answers to this get really complicated, and they aren't spelled out in the Bible itself. And finally, there's the unaccountable puzzle. And this is a really sensitive one. If babies are born guilty, what happens to them if they die? Or what about people with cognitive impairments who can never make a conscious choice about faith? The doctrine of inherited guilt just doesn't have a clear biblical answer for that. Okay, so with all those tough questions just hanging in the air, what do? Well, you do what any good investigator does. You go back to the source code. We're going to dig into the original biblical texts and see what they actually have to say. And this is where it gets really interesting. When you start looking, you discover that the entire Old Testament, we're talking nearly 2,000 years of history and prophecy, is completely, totally silent on the idea of inherited guilt. It's just not there. In fact, the Old Testament often seems to teach the exact opposite. Listen to this quote from the prophet Ezekiel. It couldn't be clearer. You are accountable for your own sin, not the sins of your parents. The whole principle is about personal responsibility. So if it's not in the Old Testament, where did this whole idea come from? It turns out that this huge, influential theological structure is basically balanced on the head of a pin. The interpretation of one single verse in the New Testament, Romans 5:12. And right here, this is the moment where everything changes. The famous theologian Augustine, he was reading a Latin translation of the Bible, and his version said that all sinned in whom, which everyone took to mean in Adam, and boom, the doctrine of original sin was born. But that's not what the Apostle Paul actually wrote. The original Greek says on the basis of which all sinned, which points to death, the condition Adam introduced, as the reason. It's a tiny difference in grammar with absolutely massive consequences. So once you see that crucial difference, a whole new picture starts to emerge. If we read the original text accurately, it gives us a completely different framework. What we get from Adam isn't his guilt, but something else. And here it is, the key idea. Adam didn't pass down his guilt, he passed down mortality. We inherit a condition, a state of being separated from God, and it's this mortal condition that makes sinning an inevitability for every single one of us. We inherit the problem, not the guilty verdict. This table really helps lay it all out side by side. The traditional view says we inherit guilt, so our biggest problem is a legal one.
The reconsidered view says we inherit mortality, and our problem is the personal sin that always flows out of that condition. We're not born guilty, we're born mortal, and because of that, we will all inevitably sin. And what's so powerful about this is how cleanly it solves those three big puzzles we talked about earlier. Justice is preserved because we're accountable for our own actions. The Christology puzzle disappears because Jesus could share in our mortality without having any guilt to inherit. And the tragic reality of infant death is understood as part of universal mortality, not as a punishment. It just fits. Okay, so think about this. If the problem is different, and in many ways much bigger than just a legal issue, then it makes sense that the solution has to be bigger too. This shift in thinking totally expands our view of what redemption is all about. It moves the goalposts. If what Adam did caused a deep fracture in the cosmos itself, a break between humanity and God, and creation and God, then the work of Christ isn't just a legal patch-up for individuals. It's the start of a complete restoration of everything. This means salvation is like a stunning, multifaceted gem. The New Testament gives us all these different angles to see it from. Christus Victor is about defeating the cosmic powers of sin and death. Recapitulation is about Jesus succeeding where Adam failed. Penal substitution still fits in too. It deals with the guilt from our actual personal sins. They all work together to give us this rich, full, orbed picture of what salvation accomplishes. And this verse from Ephesians just captures that incredible scope so perfectly. The ultimate plan isn't just about saving individual people. It's about uniting all things, heaven, earth, the entire cosmos, back together in Christ. So we want to leave you with this to chew on. What if salvation isn't primarily about looking backward and being forgiven for your past, but about looking forward and being invited to take part in the grand cosmic renewal of everything for the future?